Hi, Kat here for Lightwave Digital. In this series of videos, we're going to be talking about how to move your old assets from Lightwave 2015 to Lightwave 2024. And this is specifically targeted towards viewers and users that have just upgraded from previous versions of Lightwave, mostly from 2015, because that's the last version where we had the old shader system, which was responsible for so many iconic series and TV shows and films using Lightwave, and adapting all of that to Lightwave 2024 and giving you a guide to avoid any of the pitfalls or hesitancy that might come from trying to bring a older asset prior to the shading system being completely redone and the render engine being upgraded to incorporate physically based rendering technology. So this series of videos is for you. Now, we've got 2015 open, and I've got a very old asset from Battlestar Galactica. This was originally created in Lightwave 7.5, and we've got it here in Lightwave 2015 because this is, as I said before, the last version that more or less was using the old shading system. And we have a couple of things that are going to be going on in here. We have our animation. If you scrub through this, we've got our guns. We've got our little engines back here. We'll have to do some special conversion work for those, but the model itself is what we're going to be paying attention to for the immediate future in this series. Let's take a look at what's in here. Let's go and pop up the scene editor and the image editor. All right, and we've got basically a few objects in here. Got the Raider eye, which goes up and down for the shield. And of course, we've got the eye that goes back and forth. We have our engines master, which is just a null that's bolted onto the flight null. And another null for the muzzle flash on the guns. And a controller that controls those guns for how they fire. And this can also be made to emit particles. But for right now, what we want to do is take a look at some of the things that you're probably used to in Lightwave 2015 and just kind of get something prepped for Lightwave 24. Now, I could go directly to Lightwave 2024 and just import this straight, but I want people to get into the habit of doing something first, and that is to prep it in color space first. So let's hit the D key. This will bring up a familiar options panel to you in Lightwave 2015. We have a similar panel, but it has been changed quite significantly in 2024. And we want to go to the color space tab and make sure that we're working with the sRGB preset for something like this. Otherwise, you would be looking at something of this nature. We want to be working with sRGB. And we want to make sure that images that are actually color are set to be sRGB, and images that are scalar or like a grayscale are in linear, and that includes bump maps and normal maps. Anything that doesn't have color in it, basically, unless you specifically know that it was done in an sRGB color workspace workflow, so that we get a proper realized image on the other side when we bring it into Lightwave 2024. All right, we can go ahead and save this. Save all my objects. Yep. And we're going to save the scene. But before we leave, we're going to talk about a couple of things here that have changed significantly in Lightwave 2024. First things first, you're going to notice if you pull up the render tab that this panel in Lightwave 2024 is vastly different. And don't be afraid of it. There's some functions that are exactly the same or very similar. But the two other tabs that are going to be different are the render tab. There are some similarities in between the two, and then there's the global illumination tab. Now, in Lightwave 2024, 2018 really, that's carried through to 2024, we've changed how things work in terms of how radiosity or global illumination is calculated or evaluated, and what types of radiosity that we've got. So gone are the final gather and a backdrop only mode. It's basically just brute force in the new one. And the way that we can get there through placing either an HDRI or a backdrop like a gradient or something similar is still somewhat consistent, but we now have something that's called an environment light that drives that. And we'll get to that in just a moment. These tabs are very similar. So when I go and import this asset into Lightwave 2024, it's going to come in with things like flare to alpha and the volumetrics, hypervoxels if they were being used. But there's two modes for volumetrics in Lightwave 2024 at this time. There's a legacy mode, and then there's a modern physically based rendering engine mode. So unfortunately, they don't work together, but there's a way around that, which we would have used anyways 20 years ago on the show, because we would be constantly breaking stuff out. We wouldn't render everything in a single pass. It just was a dumb thing to do everything in a single pass. We would break things out and composite them later. So some of this will seem familiar to you as users if you're coming from previous versions of Lightwave, but understand that these two panels have effectively been redone with the consideration of the new render engine in mind. So let's close all this down. And we'll get this packaged up. So we're going to go export, package scene. You know how this works. So package it over. I already have this package, so I'm not going to follow through with this operation. But I like to convert this stuff into a new content directory should I wish to preserve the original. And once that's packaged, we can jump over into 2024, load it up, and see what we get. So we'll be right back.